The meditative introvert likes to believe that they can stay in their cave and impact the world from afar. And this belief, or fantasy, or idealization becomes increasingly more palpable as someone increases their spiritual intelligence. But at what point does this become a delusional trap that keeps us hidden and playing small rather than actually engaging in the world in a way that could bring about genuine social, political, creative, artistic, interpersonal change? That's the topic that we're going to be exploring in today's episode of Inner Work Essentials, with today's book recommendation, Subtle Activism by David Nicol. This is actually the first academic treatise on the topic of subtle activism, which we're going to be looking at in a little more detail in about 30 seconds' time. But first, a disclaimer. I'm not sure how to say this, but this might be the first episode in this series where I'm going to present information which I don't necessarily align with all that much anymore. I believe in meditation. I believe in the power of collective intention. I believe in prayer. I believe in the genuine yet subtle impact of certain energetic forces and how they can change outer situations. And yet, if I had to choose between subtle activism and in-person activism, I wouldn't actually choose either. I'm not necessarily an activist. I remember back in my history, when I was studying history at university, I looked at the humanitarian intervention in conflict. I looked at the way that charities are structured around natural disasters and genocides and famines and wars, and how people respond to these kinds of crises. And a huge statistic hit me one day when I was reading about the 2001 war in Iraq, or the beginning of the war in Iraq after 9/11. Did you know that throughout all of the major European capitals, Berlin, Paris, London, and London especially, millions of people went to the streets to protest the invasion of Iraq? In London, it was over 1 million people. Some estimates say 1.3 million, others slightly under 1 million, but nonetheless, 1 million people marching on the streets for social change. And what happened? We still went to war. The greatest single protest in human history. Same outcome. Did it change anything? I don't know. I still honestly don't know. So when we come to the topic of subtle activism, there's the subtle part, which is the meditation part and the group intention part, but there's also the activism part, which I've still yet to fully digest. And that's my transparent disclaimer. I am going to present these ideas because I think they're useful, but ultimately I'm not fully sold on the validity or just the general applicability of what I'm about to share with you, because I think there are more useful ways for us to spend our time, namely cleaning up our internal system and making an impact in a very concrete, physical way in the environment around us. Digital technology, sure, there's some hypocrisy. Here I am speaking with you through a screen. Tricky territory to talk about, so let's take it to the book, and I'm going to introduce the idea of subtle activism in case you've never heard of it before, and I'm actually going to do it by following many comment requests, which is to read more from the book. Fortunately, this introduction is one of those rare introductions where it's incredibly well written, it's incredibly to the point, and it's actually perfectly suited to this video. David Nicol, who is a leading transpersonal thinker, philosopher, psychologist, I guess, but mainly a transpersonal thinker, has written really well here, so I'm going to let him present and defend and articulate the concept of subtle activism, because I can't do it as well as he can, which is why we're reading the book, not trusting what I'm saying, as in every single video. Go to the books and the people who know more than me. So, subtle activism. I'm going to read at length for about a minute or so. Here we go, quote. This book suggests that spiritual or consciousness-based practices like meditation, prayer, and ritual, in addition to their positive effect on individuals, may play a subtle, yet crucial role in supporting change in the world. It proposes that the intentional use of such practices for collective and not merely individual benefit can be understood as a subtle form of activism or subtle activism. Subtle activism, defined, is a creative approach to social engagement that broadens the traditional scope of both activism and spirituality. On the one hand, it can be seen as a novel component of an integrative spirituality that aims to extend our spiritual attention to all aspects of our lives, including our participation in the social and political realm. On the other hand, it can be viewed as part of an integral approach to social change that seeks to address the underlying psychological and spiritual dimensions of socio-political transformation alongside outer actions. Key statement here, final sentence. In straddling the worlds of spirituality and social change, subtle activism represents a bridge between the consciousness movement and the movements for peace, environmental sustainability, and social justice. There's a lot there. Hopefully, I don't need to explain it any more than David Nicol explained himself. Subtle activism is really a complementary form of engagement in the world which seeks to bring about some form of positive change, and as the title of this video suggests, a way that we could possibly salvage the world from the chaos, destruction, and trauma which is eating us alive. My problem with subtle activism isn't its usefulness. I believe that if you have a twice per day meditation practice, let's say 20 minutes each time, and in the morning you focus on yourself, you focus on your own introspective process where you're building your subtle sense, you're working on your spiritual intelligence, and then it ends, you go about your day, you have your job, you have your relationships, you have your world work, you have your normal, consensual, everyday reality life, and then in the evening, with that extra bit of energy available, you then do another meditation, maybe with some friends, maybe friends around the world, or a group of people who are focused on a certain issue, like, let's imagine a certain war. Let's imagine a certain war that may or may not be going on right now, and you're sending energy, you're sending conflict resolution energy with your 5-person meditation for 20 minutes per night. What's that for? What does that do? Is that worth your time? Yes, I would argue it is worth your time. Why is it worth your time? Well, even if it just at the very least gives you a sense of being engaged with the world, maybe it uplifts your mood, but then it does get into spiritual bypass the inflation territory when you believe that you and your 5 friends are actually the world saviors who are here to end the conflict once and for all from the privacy of your bedroom. Subtle Activism, the book that I just highlighted, goes into many different examples of different consciousness movements and different interesting statistics in the realm of subtle science and spiritual work behind the scenes to show that if you take, I'm sure you've heard of this before, you drop 1,000 monks in a city and they meditate for multiple hours every day and the crime rates decrease. You've seen that idea before. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but something like a 10% decrease in crime because the monks are meditating. And you're like, how does that work? There's a field theory of the mind. There's some kind of concept of how we're collectively interwoven into a psychic structure which is beyond our perception and yet also deeply impacts us. How much can one person do? How much can a group do? Again, go back to the Iraq war protest. How many millions of people is required to stop a massive geopolitical event from occurring or bring its resolution? Clearly didn't work in 2001. What makes you think that you and your friends are going to be able to do much today? It's a really tricky space to be in, and it almost takes us to like a spiritually wrapped version of Facebook activism where we'll share a friend's fundraiser or retweet or repost something that upsets us emotionally so that we can feel better, thinking that we're saving the world or helping the world. This is the idea of the wounded healer that we discussed in the last episode in this series. I don't think it's that valuable. It doesn't mean I think we should discredit it. I remember when, about 2 years ago, things were getting pretty crazy in the world, I actually joined in with a few group meditations because I already had a consistent meditation practice, and I thought, why not? Why not send my energy outwards and get involved? How much involvement did I actually have? Upon reflection, not that much. It was a good feeling for a while, but the real involvement I had with the world was the next day, or maybe later in that day, going on to a client session one-to-one, or having a conversation with a friend, or going to the gym and helping someone with a very basic like pull-up problem or something. that was more of a form of activism than me sitting down and meditating and sending good vibes and love and light into the world. Of course, I'm simplifying. Of course, I'm generalizing. This is a really challenging video for me to make because I do believe in the power of prayer. I do believe that there's a genuine impact. I've read enough studies and enough research. I've probably got about 10, 12 books just over here off camera, conveniently off camera. I actually don't have them. It's a green screen, as some people have suggested. I have about 10 or 12 books on subtle activism, on psi phenomena, and you can see all of this research, and it's cool. It's interesting. But I don't know what it's worth. I don't know what it's worth compared to trauma work. I don't know what it's worth compared to you doing the things which you know you need to do. Are you really at your max capacity to be able to impact the world or some kind of massive social movement if you're poisoning yourself with cigarettes and alcohol, you're not sleeping 8 or 9 hours an evening, you have yet to understand that water quality and food quality is important, and you actually don't have fulfilling work for 40, 50 hours of the week? Is it bypassing? It might be bypassing. Is it focusing on the wrong things? No, it's focusing on the right thing, but maybe in the wrong quantity and at the wrong time. I suppose my personal philosophy shines through here, and it's not really so much about the topic which you're initially interested in, so I apologize if you want to learn more about subtle activism proper. You can definitely read the book for yourself. It is such a marvelous read. Heavily highlighted, really worth buying, digesting, and checking out for yourself. You're a grown adult, and I trust that grown adults can make their own decisions, especially on contentious topics where there's many different ways of looking at something or digesting something. What do I think? Well, I don't practice subtle activism in the proper sense anymore. I haven't joined in any group meditation for a while, but I've organized meditations with people who are close to me, and we've set shared intentions and powerful experiences to come through. I've sent prayers or well wishes to clients or friends who are having tough times, and I feel a heart-based connection. Even if it's just imaginary or it's maybe inflated, there's something that comes out that helps me to feel like I'm doing something more than doing nothing. And it's a complementary process. It's a complement to the real rooted, the real rooted and grounded earthwork. Being here, not as someone who's here to save the world, a la the wounded healer who doesn't know how to meet their own needs, but to be here as someone who, through their creative process or through their interpersonal community work, actually makes a genuine impact. We don't need to protest in the streets. We don't need to sit down in meditation groups and sacred sister circles, sacred brother circles, and spend hours in meditation each week. That's something we can do. It's something that's wonderful, but we need to be aware when that becomes an identity game that avoids the actual responsibility of sorting out our own individual system. And this is the key point: sorting out our individual nature so that we can emanate more powerfully and more skillfully, and above all else, more potently and truthfully into the immediate world around us, rather than preoccupying ourselves with distant world events, which are fed to us through screens, and from one perspective may keep us informed and may be important, but from another perspective may keep us distracted, dumb, and scared, and then trigger a shadow of wanting to fix that based on previous trauma when we were scared and wanted to help by helping. And you get what I'm saying. That's all I'm going to share. The decision's up to you. Is subtle activism worth your time? Is it something that you've engaged in? You can leave a comment and let me know. For me personally, I think it's useful, but definitely secondary, tertiary importance compared to trauma work over multiple years and having a genuine offer, a genuine service in a practical sense to the people around you. Next episode of Inner Work Essentials, we're going to be wrapping up with a bridge between spirituality and embryology. We're going to be looking at the windows to the womb and how early life in utero basically encodes our nervous system for all the traumas which are to come. My neighbour's hammering on his wall, so that signals I think it's going to be a hard-hitting episode. You can watch it over here. I'll see you over there, and let me know what you think about subtle activism. I'm still undecided.